Rain tapped softly on the wooden shingles of our cottage as I watched the world blur behind the water-streaked window. The moss-draped pines that guarded our home were shrouded in mist, and the air smelled of damp earth and rain. Inside, a fire crackled low in the hearth, casting flickering amber shadows on the walls and the old calendar hanging by the door. I stood there, arms wrapped around myself, heart thudding with nerves and a joy I scarcely believed. This was the day I had imagined 1,000 times. My older sister, who had ventured away from our quiet valley years ago, was coming back. For as long as I could remember, I had marked each passing day with a careful scratch on the doorframe, hoping to see her face again. But even counting the scratches had lost meaning until now. Every sound in the weather, every soft drip of rain, every distant roll of thunder, seemed to carry her name to me. A sudden knock at the door made me jump. I peered through the frosted glass and saw a hunched shape against the gray sky. My breath caught. In a moment, I opened the door to a rush of cool air and drizzle, revealing my sister standing at the threshold. Her coat was soaked, and her shoulders trembled, but her eyes were as I remembered, deep and kind. "She's back," I whispered, more to myself than to her. She didn't say anything as I helped her shed the heavy cloak. It fell to the floor in a puddle of rainwater and pine needles, and I guided her to the hearth's warmth. Her long hair, dark and tangled by wind and weather, cascaded down her shoulders in wild waves. I gently took her damp boots to dry by the fire. Our cottage was small and humble, its wooden walls filled with the scent of lavender and pine from drying bundles Grandma had left hanging. I lit a candle on the table, and she sat across from me, fingers around a carved wooden cup of tea. "You found your way here," I said softly. The words trembled out of me, though they were true. She nodded slightly and sipped the hot brew. Her hands shook, but she held the cup as though it were precious. In the flickering light, I saw a flash of recognition and warmth pass over her face. We ate a simple supper of lentil stew and barley bread. Outside, rain pattered on the roof. We sat close by the fire, side by side on the wooden bench, and ate slowly. My sister was quiet and pale. Sometimes she stared into the flames like she was looking at something far away. I asked her how the journey had been, but she only shook her head and gave a small smile, as if words might shatter the fragile moment. Late that night, as the storm outside lulled to a gentle drizzle, I helped her to the spare bed. She lay down beneath a patchwork quilt warmed by coals glowing in the hearth. I tucked the blanket around her, lingering at the doorway. The lantern's light painted soft, golden halos around her. I could barely place her face in the shadows, older now, and yet still my sister. "I missed you," I whispered. She didn't answer, but her eyes glistened. The rain outside was a lullaby in the dark, and as I closed the door, I felt a relief so immense it almost hurt. She was home. The morning sun was a pale disk behind gray clouds, spilling gentle light through the dew on the window panes. The rain had not ended. Steady drops dripped from the eaves, and the world outside was painted in endless shades of green. I found my sister already awake at dawn, sitting by the hearth with her chin resting on her knees. The room smelled of pine logs and herbal tea. I poured us each a cup of steaming chamomile, the herbal scent curling into the air like soft smoke. She accepted her cup from me with a small, grateful smile. "Good morning," I said, though the word felt strange after so long. "Morning," she replied quietly. For a moment, we sat together in silence, watching the fog lift a little above the treetops. Birds started calling in the branches outside, answering the rain's retreat. By midday, the sky had cleared enough for us to step outside. We found chores waiting: wood to chop, water to draw from the icy spring, and seeds to plant in the overgrown garden. My sister picked up the axe to hew wood, and I carried buckets of water. Together, we worked at these simple tasks, the rhythm of labor soothing like a familiar lullaby. Rain beads fell from our sleeves, glinting on the cut wood. My hands were steady and warm from the firelight, and hers trembled only slightly as she brought the axe down with a practiced swing. When the chopping was done, I washed vegetables in a tin basin by the open window. Raindrops collected on the rim and rolled down, catching tiny pieces of clover as they fell. My sister swept the floor of fallen needles and dust, careful to make every corner clean. She hummed a soft tune as she worked, an old lullaby Grandma used to sing. The melody filled the cottage with something sweet and brimming with memory. As the sun moved west, I fetched a basket of apples and nuts from the pantry for lunch. We took a break beneath the porch awning, sipping sweet berry tea warmed over the coals. I told her stories about the silly critters who sometimes came to our doorstep, an adventurous raccoon who once stole cheese, and the timid fawn that watched me from the forest edge. She chuckled softly at each tale, a sound I hadn't heard in a long time. After lunch, I showed her the small clearing by the brook where I liked to sit. The moss was so bright green after the rain that it felt like a soft carpet laid for us alone. Wildflowers nodded in the mist, and the air tasted clean. She leaned back against a fallen cedar and took a slow breath as if savoring a memory. "It's so quiet here," she said, half to herself. In the valley, the clear stream gurgled over smooth stones, and birds called like distant bells. A gentle breeze moved through the firs, carrying the scent of wild mint. She closed her eyes briefly, letting it fill her lungs. In her hands, she held a small wildflower I had picked, a pale daisy with petals speckled by rain. She twirled it between her fingers as if it were fragile. I sat beside her in the damp grass, our feet dangling near the water's edge. "Do you remember the summer when we built a secret fort out of branches down here?" I asked quietly. She smiled and opened her eyes. "I thought that place had been forgotten," she said, "but it seems it remembered us." We spoke of other memories, how we used to dance barefoot in the rain as children, and how we learned to read by candlelight with Grandma. At each recollection, her eyes lit up a little, and the world felt a hair's breadth brighter. For a while, the silence of the valley held only our laughter. I asked her if she would stay now, at least a while longer, and she opened her eyes with a little, hopeful smile. "I would like that," she whispered. But as twilight edged the sky, something about her remained clouded. We walked home slowly, gathering a bundle of firewood and filling baskets with ferns. My sister paused by the cabin's broken gate and gently pushed it open. "We should fix this," she said. It won't hold much longer. I nodded. We will, together. Don't worry. The fire that evening burned brighter than it had in years. I made nut bread, and we cracked walnuts by the hearth. The cottage glowed with soft orange light, and the rain began again outside, peppering the wooden roof like a gentle rain stick. Sometimes I caught her staring at the cracked wood planks of the floor, or the patch of sagging ceiling. In those moments she looked lost in thought, shoulders hunched. Quiet evenings found us returning to our tasks. The lamp was lit early, and we sat together on the bench near the fire. My sister began brushing my hair, just as she used to when I was a child. Each stroke was careful and tender. "You smell of lavender," she murmured, referring to Grandma's sachets I always wore. "It reminds me of home." I told her about my days in the valley without her, about the gentle cycle of seasons, how spring brought salmon berries and summer fireflies. Each story painted pictures for her, and I saw her relax little by little. Once, through the window behind her, I saw the moon peek out from clouds, and just for a heartbeat, her face bore a peaceful expression. Yet, no matter how much I tried to fill the silence with warmth, the ache of her silence remained. I was afraid to ask if she was haunted by something, though each creak of the cabin and each distant thunderclap made me wonder. Once I almost reached out to touch her shoulder, but held back as if the air itself could break. She sat with a jar of plum jam in her lap, unscrewing the lid and recorking it, doing anything to keep her hands busy. That night, we shared the bed as we once did under Grandma's quilt. I curled up on one side and she on the other, the quilt tucking us in together. Outside, the rain drummed in steady cadence. Sometimes, through her light slumber, she murmured a lullaby in a language I didn't know, a hymn to memory and forgetting. Once she said a name I didn't recognize in a whisper, then bolted upright with a sharp intake of breath. I caught her hand and whispered, "I'm here." She melted back against the mattress, closing her eyes again. Our breathing synchronized with the gentle rhythm of the rain. For the rest of that night, the rain pattered more softly on the roof. We sat quietly together, legs folded under the quilt on the floor. I hummed a lullaby under my breath, one our grandmother used to sing. My sister leaned against me as if I were solid ground, and I felt her weight ease. As midnight passed, the only sounds were the coals crackling low and the gentle drip of water outside. I felt my own eyes grow heavy. Before falling asleep, I felt for her hand and gave it a gentle squeeze. In that moment, we had healed something silent in the dark, and, as I finally drifted off to sleep beside her, it felt like I was sleeping for the first time in years. One night, the rain came down in earnest, drumming on the roof with frantic energy. The fire was low, embers glowing red behind the cracked logs. My sister couldn't sleep. I could tell as soon as I woke from a light nap by the hearth. She sat by the window, looking out into the endless night. Lightning flickered silently through the curtains as clouds choked the moon. I brought her a cup of chamomile and sat on the floor at her feet. Without looking at me, she took the cup and warmed her hands around it. The tea was herbal and soothing, but her eyes looked tired and wounded. "Tell me about it," I said softly. I didn't name what I meant, only that I was there to listen. My voice was almost lost under the wind's howl. Her shoulders shook. I wanted to forget, she whispered, voice raw. I wanted silence, not like this. Tears escaped her eyes, and she finally turned to face me. In the lantern light, I saw the reflection of something I hadn't seen in years, a deep, haunted fear hiding behind her exhausted eyes. She drew her knees to her chest. I left to find peace, she said, voice trembling. I left because I hoped the world beyond the valley had answers. But my dreams turned into nightmares. The world out there, it's full of too many shapes. She swallowed, choking on the last word. I held my breath. Shapes. Her hands gripped the wooden cup so tightly the rim dug into her palms. She stared at the floor, then suddenly looked up at me, eyes pleading. People, memories, mistakes. Everything I ran from followed me home. Her confession fell out of her like rain breaking through a dam. She was silent a moment, staring into the night beyond the window. I reached out and gently wiped the tears escaping down her cheeks. She pulled her knees closer, trembling. I thought if I could climb that mountain ridge, or cross the forests and the sea, I could escape the echoes of what happened. But no matter where I went, everything found me. I remember the screams in the hospital ward, the smell of smoke, the weight of it all. Her voice broke, and she hid her face in her hands. My throat tightened. Oh, my sister, I whispered. You did so much that day. The candle flickered, but I tried to save someone. I should have, but... She pressed her lips together, refusing to say more. I did all I could. I did not move. The quiet rain was loud in the pause. It wasn't your fault, I finally said. We all know you tried. You're not to blame. She shook her head slowly, but I saw it all happen, every detail. And I couldn't change a thing, she said, face growing even paler in the wavering light. Tears trailed down her cheeks. Every night since, I wake up as if it's happening again. Fire cracking in the sky. My bones turn to lead, she said, her voice growing stronger like a storm building. I thought I would break under the weight. I moved closer and wrapped the quilt around us both, pulling her into my arms. You're safe here, I whispered, rubbing her back. No one can hurt you now. She cried softly into my shoulder for a long while, the old fears pouring out in the dark. The fire sputtered once, then steadied as the first glow warmed the hearth. Outside, the storm gradually quieted to a gentle drizzle, as if listening. After a time, her crying subsided into gentle sobs. I tilted her chin up to look into her eyes, now red and damp but clearer. Your sister is here, I said, heart trembling. The valley is here. You're home. She hugged me tighter, as though afraid I might vanish. We stayed like that on the floor by the hearth, wrapped in the quilt, silently watching the last of the embers glow. By then, something had shifted between us. An unspoken bond deeper than before, forged by night and whispered truths. She finally pulled back just enough to rest her forehead against mine. Her breath was shaky but steady. Thank you, she murmured, for being here. I brushed a wet strand of hair from her face. "You don't ever have to say thank you to me," I said softly. "I'm here because I love you." She managed a small, weary smile. The warmth of it eased the knot in my chest. For the rest of that night, the rain pattered more softly on the roof. We sat quietly together, legs folded under the quilt on the floor. I hummed a lullaby under my breath, one our grandmother used to sing. My sister leaned against me as if I were solid ground, and I felt her weight ease. As midnight passed, the only sounds were the coals crackling low and the gentle drip of water outside. I felt my own eyes grow heavy. Before falling asleep, I felt for her hand and gave it a gentle squeeze. In that moment, we had healed something silent in the dark, and as I finally drifted off to sleep beside her, it felt like I was sleeping for the first time in years. Dawn crept softly through the curtains as I woke to birdsong. My sister still slept on the bench by the hearth, wrapped in the quilt. Morning was calm after the night's storm. I quietly stood and stoked the fire with kindling, and soon the cabin filled with warmth and the smell of pine smoke. She woke to find breakfast on the table, sweet herbal tea and warmed barley porridge. Outside, the rain had stopped, leaving diamonds of water on the ferns and on the fallen log beside our door. We shared the meal in companionable silence, listening to the gentle tap of morning droplets on the roof. When she quietly thanked me for breakfast, I smiled. "It's what sisters do," I said. She returned the smile, small but real, and reached across to squeeze my hand. After breakfast, we stepped outside into the brightening day to plant the herbs my sister had bought. Dew still clung to the leaves. Each drop was a tiny mirror of the sky. She stopped at the old wooden gate. Its hinges creaked softly under her hand, and leaned into it. I saw determination in her eyes. "Tomorrow," she said, voice steady, "we'll fix this fence for good, and maybe we can start fresh with the garden, too." I nodded, feeling hope bloom again in the air. "We will, together," I replied. Returning inside, I glanced at the linen wall calendar. November's page was pinned and neatly folded back, but the square where December should have been was empty. My heart fluttered. I stepped closer and ran my finger along the torn edge of the cloth. The missing page left a pale rectangle of bare wall. She came beside me, wrapping her arm around my shoulders. "Are you worried about it?" she asked softly, noticing my gaze. I shook my head gently. "No," I whispered, surprising myself with the truth. "I don't care about it anymore." Outside, a beam of late afternoon sun shone through the window, painting our hands in golden light. In that moment, the empty spot on the wall felt like a bright new page we hadn't written yet. We would name our days ourselves from now on. We spent the rest of the day tidying the cottage together. She hummed that lullaby Grandma used to sing, and I remembered the words, joining in quietly. The final chores, mending a broken shelf, bringing fresh blankets, lighting candles, felt easy now, warmed by her presence. As twilight fell and the stars began to peek through the clearing sky, we lit the oil lamps and sat again by the fire. My sister leaned her head on my shoulder as we watched the last flames die down. The world outside was hushed, and only the faint hoot of an owl drifted through the crisp night air. I wrapped the quilt snug around us. In the quiet that settled, I thought, the day the calendar disappeared had arrived without announcement. It was simply today, filled with its ordinary moments of peace. Outside, a distant rooster crowed, welcoming the new dawn. And with her home at last, it was enough. Time stood still in comfort, and we closed our eyes without a care for which day it was.